1-800-449-8255. It's the Clark the Shark Show. You know right where you are, baby. And I'm about to review one of rock and roll's all-time amazing albums by, look at this unsightly mob. One of my favorite bands, the Stooges, 1969. Iggy Pop, Ron Asheton, couple of rock and roll geniuses. Of course, the other Asheton on drums. And this album will change rock and roll forever, people. One of the most amazing, incredible punk rock, indie rock, alternative rock, way ahead of its time. Way, way, way ahead of its time, baby. The Stooges. That's right. Iggy and the Stooges. Iggy Pop. Iggy Stooge, as he was known then. And this album influenced me and my guitar playing with the Greenhouse Effect and all the other shit I played with in the South Bay. Redondo Beach, Torrance, Gardena, Los Angeles, Long Beach, Lomita, Hermosa Beach. We all love the Stooges and Iggy Pop. And in 1987, at the corner of Prospect and Pacific Coast Highway, I was 22 years old. And I had to buy this album at Music Plus. The Stooges. I walked in the store. I'm seeing the memory right now. And I went and grabbed the Stooges, an album at the time that was 18 years old. And everyone raved about it in all the magazines. But I knew the Stooges already, because I knew punk rock. I knew how much Greg Ginn and Black Flag loved this album and all the other punkers. These guys, back in Detroit, Iggy Pop and the Stooges, you know, they formed this band in 68, and they honestly weren't as good as the MC5. That's a better band. And you could tell Iggy and the Stooges were into that 1966, the Music Machine, the Count Five, Yardbirds, The Who. They loved it. 1966 garage punk, garage music revival in America. And the Stooges missed out on that in 66. They didn't come out till 69, and they were way behind the times with this album. Rock had moved on from that. You had The Who with Tommy and, the Beatles with Abbey Road. But the Stooges were quite a spectacle with this album. Produced by John Cale, a genius visionary, of course, with the Velvet Underground. And God bless Elektra Records for discovering and putting the Stooges music out, Iggy Pop. And, man, what an album it is. What an album. And in being behind the times, where they just worshiped 1966 garage and The Who and the Standells and all that, the Stooges actually influence everyone from Black Sabbath to punk rock, and this album somehow ends up way ahead of its time. Like, this album sounds like it's from 1991 or 1985 or 1995, or it's 20 years ahead of 1969. There's nothing like this from that year. I mean, the MC5 are pretty fucking killer, but they don't sound like this. And for me, the Stooges are Ron Asheton's guitar, man. I mean, Iggy Pop is awesome. Fuck yeah, it gets 5 stars, baby. Lots of 5 stars for this. But 1969 and I Want to Be Your Dog, just muddy, sloppy, grungy. I took this album home and I heard that Bo Diddley beat, that 1969, and I was like, what the fuck is this? Weirdest shit I ever heard. But when I heard I Want to Be Your Dog, I was like, oh, this is epic. This is punk rock in 1969, 3 years after the Music Machine. but before the Ramones, way before Black Flag, and way before me, Clark the Shark, at 1-800-449-8255. And We Will Fall, which is the long 10-minute song like the Velvet Underground. Amazing. Side 1 is amazing, but side 2 is even better. No fun and real cool time. And Anne, Not Right, Little Doll. The desperation and confusion and just insanity in this band and in Iggy Pop's mind. This band was just a way ahead of its time, kind of like that band Big Star. But this is grunge, punk, underground, garage rock, noisy, but it's as heavy as like Black Sabbath. It's fucking so killer. The Stooges. And Ron Ashton on guitar, his brother on drums, and sadly the bassist died of this band way back in the 70s. Oh, fuck, that's so sad. Dave Alexander was only 27, man. And, but 4 genius visionaries. I love Ron Ashton. His guitar created punk rock and grunge and alternative and indie rock. And, oh, man. What an influential, important guy in history, Ron Ashton. All of them, man. Dave, Ron, and Scott. Of course, Iggy Pop, genius frontman. Hung out with David Bowie. Bowie loved his music. And of course, the Stooges would get even better on Funhouse, 1970. An album that I have trouble with, Funhouse. To me, it's a problematic album, and I've struggled to get through it. But sometimes in a certain mood, I'm like, this blows my mind because it's so ahead of its time. 1969 and 1970, the Stooges way out of time. They don't belong, man. Iggy and the Stooges, they don't cut it alongside pros like The Who or Led Zeppelin or Sabbath or the Beatles or the Stones, but they have something those bands don't have. They've got an originality, sadness, depression, anxiety, miserable loneliness. This confused man, Iggy Pop. This guy is rock and roll, man. He's a fucking genius. And I had to buy this album when I was 22 in 1987 at Music Plus because I had to hear one of the greatest bands of all time. And when I heard this, it made me think Black Flag sucked. For a while, I listened to Ron Ashton, and I'm like, he's better than Greg Ginn. He's more pissed off, he's more angry, but Clark the Shark loves Greg Ginn. And I love Black Flag with fucking Jealous Again. Chavo singing. I think it's their best album, and that album comes directly from the Stooges, man. Forget the Sex Pistols and the Damned and the Clash. I mean, those bands are interesting, but the Stooges, man, they make you forget the Ramones, too. Iggy Pop lets you know he invented everything. This genius, and Ron Ashton, God bless him, amazing. Out of tune, horrible sounding guitar, terrible tones, and yet it's so angry and muddy and grungy and pissed off. Oh, there's no band more fucking pissed off than this garage band, this unprofessional, lousy, horrible band, the Stooges. And I fucking love them. They're my favorite band because 22 years old, you gotta consider my situation. I'm living in and out of home at Redondo Beach, Torrance. Looking for a place to sleep, man. Just looking for anywhere to go. I got a little record player, man. And I got my Stooges' first album, I Want to Be Your Dog, and No Fun. All these amazing songs to play. And just out of tune, out of key, horrible singing. There's no talent in this band at all. And yet they're angry, their misery, and their agony. They're sad, pissed off, horrible life in Detroit. They're just going nowhere. And they put it all on this album so beautifully. The Stooges and Iggy Pop, 1969. I Want to Be Your Dog, man. I just fucking call this album I Want to Be Your Dog. What do I rate this album on a scale of 1 to 10? Man, it gets a 20. This album, I can't compare it to The Who. I can't compare it to Zeppelin. I can't compare it to Sabbath or Deep Purple or the Beatles or the Stones or the Hollies or any of that, man. The Stooges are their own entity. These guys designed the 1990s from 30 years before. These guys designed Seattle and London and grunge and Chicago and Detroit and New York, CBGB, Los Angeles, the Antique Club, Al's Bar, everywhere, Raji's, all the punk rock bands in Redondo Beach, Torrance, Long Beach, San Pedro, Seattle. And you don't let it, man, let it be known Redondo Beach is a capital of punk rock. We all fucking love the Stooges and Iggy Pop. We love this album. We love it more than the Ramones. We love this album more. Man, we love it more than the Sex Pistols and that crap from London or the UK. We love the Stooges because they invented punk rock. They invented grunge. You could almost say they invented heavy metal. These guys are like the Music Machine and the Count 5 rolled into one with the Who, with Led Zeppelin, with Black Sabbath, with the Yardbirds, with everything, man. We owe a debt of gratitude. Every rock and roll band, everyone who ever picked up a guitar, they owe this fucking album. Ron Ashton, Iggy Pop, rest in peace, Dave. 27, he died, man, the bassist. 27, he died in 1975 of alcoholism. And I know what it's like, man, to drink. Dave Alexander's gone. Ron and Scott Ashton, I don't even know. They might be gone too, I don't know. But I know Iggy's still here, man. And people make fun of Iggy, but don't make fun of Iggy, man. I mean, they're all saying with David Bowie not around, you know, his career is over. That ain't true, man. Because Iggy's a living legend, man. Fucking living legend. Forever. The Stooges, 1969. Way ahead of its time. It invented everything. The originators. They started it all. And in 1987, 1983, 1982, I loved this album when I was 17. They wrote about this in Rolling Stone and BAM Magazine and all those magazines, Circus, Cream, because this album was so great, because Iggy Pop was so ahead of his time. And David Bowie was smart genius to know, man. It was awesome. 1-800-449-8255, The Stooges. Rock on.